Seized with an immediate desire to reveal himself, Harry pulled off the cloak with a flourish. "Good evening, Professor." "Merlin's beard, Harry, you made me jump," said Slughorn, stopping dead in his tracks and looking wary. "How did you get outside the castle?" "I think Filch must have forgotten to lock the doors," said Harry cheerfully, and was delighted to see Slughorn scowl. "I'll be reporting that man. He's more concerned about litter than proper security, if you ask me. But why are you out here, Harry?" "Well, sir, it's Hagrid," said Harry, who knew that was the right thing to do. Just now was to tell the truth. "He's pretty upset. But you won't tell anyone, Professor. I don't want trouble for him." Slughorn curiosity was evidently aroused. "Well, I can't promise that," he said gruffly, "but I know that Dumbledore trusts Hagrid to the hilt, so I'm sure he can't be up to anything very dreadful." "Well, it's this giant spider. He's had it for years. It lived in the forest. It could talk and everything." "I heard rumors there were acromentulas in the forest," said Slughorn softly, looking over the mass of black trees. "It's true, then?" "Yes," said Harry. "But this one, Aragog, the first one Hagrid ever got, died last night. He's devastated. He wants company while he buries it, and I said I'd go." "Touching, touching," said Slughorn absent-mindedly, his large droopy eyes fixed upon the distant lights of Hagrid's cabin. "But acromantula venom is very valuable. If the beast only just died, it might not yet have dried out. Of course, I wouldn't want to do anything insensitive if Hagrid's upset. But if there were any way to procure some, I mean, it's almost impossible to get venom from an acromantula while it's alive." Slughorn seemed to be talking more to himself than Harry now. "Seems to be an awful waste not to collect it. Might get 100 galleons a pint. To be frank, my salary is not large." And now Harry saw clearly what was to be done. "Well," he said, with the most convincing hesitancy, "well, if you wanted to come, Professor, Hagrid would probably be really pleased. Give Aragog a better send-off, you know?" "Yes, of course," said Slughorn, his eyes now gleaming with enthusiasm. "I tell you what, Harry, I'll meet you down there with a bottle or two. We'll drink the poor beast's, well, not health, but we'll send it off in style anyway, once it's buried. And I'll change my tie. This one's a little exuberant for the occasion." He bustled back to the castle, and Harry sped off to Hagrid's, delighted with himself. "You come," croaked Hagrid, when he opened up the door and saw Harry emerging from the invisibility cloak in front of him. "Yeah, Ron and Hermione couldn't, though," said Harry. "They're really sorry." Don't matter. He'd have been touched, y'all hear, though, Harry." Hagrid gave a great sob. He had made himself a black armband out of what looked like a rag dipped in boot polish, and his eyes were puffy, red, and swollen. Harry patted him consolingly on the elbow, which was the highest point of Hagrid he could easily reach. "Where are we burying him?" he asked. "The forest?" "Blimey, no," said Hagrid, wiping his streaming eyes on the bottom of his shirt. "The other spiders won't let me anywhere near their webs now Aragog's gone. Turns out it was on his orders they didn't eat me." "Can you believe that, Harry?" The honest answer was yes. Harry recalled that painful ease the scene when he and Ron had come face to face with the acromentulas. They had been quite clear that Aragog was the only thing that stopped them from meeting Hagrid. Never been an area in the forest I couldn't go before, said Hagrid, shaking his head. It isn't easy getting Aragog's body out of there, I could tell you. You usually eat their dead, see? But I wanted to give him a nice burial, a proper send-off. He broke into sobs again, and Harry resumed the patting of his elbow, saying as he did so, for the potion seemed to indicate that it was the right thing to do, Professor Slughorn met me coming down here, Hagrid. Not in trouble, are you? Said Hagrid, looking up, alarmed. You shouldn't be out of the castle this evening. I know it. It's my fault. No. When he heard what I was doing, he said he'd like to come and pay his last respects to Aragog, too, said Harry. He's gone to change into something more suitable, I think. And he said he'd be bring some bottles so you can drink to Aragog's memory. Did he? Said Hagrid, looking both astonished and touched. That's right nice of him, that is, and not turning you in either. I'm never really had a lot to do with Horace Slughorn before. Coming to see old Aragog off, though, eh? Well, he'd like that, Aragog would. Harry thought privately that Aragog would have liked most about Slughorn was the ample amount of edible flesh he provided, but he merely moved to the rear window of Hagrid's hut, where he saw a rather horrid sight of an enormous dead spider lying on its back outside with its legs curled and tangled. Are you going to bury him here, Hagrid, in your garden? Just beyond the pumpkin patch, I thought, said Hagrid in a croaked voice. I've already dug the, grave. Just thought he'd say a few nice things over him, happy memories, His voice quivered and broke. There was a knock on the door, and he turned to answer it, blowing his nose with a great spotted handkerchief as he did so. Slughorn hurried over the threshold, several bottles in arms, wearing a somber black cravat. Hagrid, he said, in deep, grave voice, so very sorry to hear of your loss. That's very nice of you, yeah, said Hagrid. Thanks a lot, and thanks for not giving Harry detention, neither. Wouldn't have dreamed of it, said Slughorn. Sad night. Where is the poor creature? Out there, said Hagrid, shaking his in a shaking voice. Shall we do it then? The three of them stepped into the back garden. The moon was glistening palely through the trees now, and its rays mingled with the light spilled from Hagrid's window to illuminate Aragog's body, lying on the edge of the massive pit beside a 10-foot-high mound of freshly dug earth. Magnificent, said Slughorn, approaching the spider's head, where 8 milky eyes stared blankly at the sky, and 2 huge, curved pincers shone motionless in the moonlight. Harry thought he heard a twinkle of bottles as Slughorn bent over the pincers, apparently examining the enormous hairy head. It's not everyone appreciates how beautiful they are, said Hagrid to Slughorn's back, tears leaking from the corners of his crinkled eyes. I don't know you were interested in creatures like Aragog, Horace. Interested? My dear Hagrid, I revere them, said Slughorn, stepping back from the body. Harry saw a glint of a bottle disappearing beneath his cloak, though Hagrid, mopping his eyes once more, noticed nothing. Now, shall we proceed to the burial? Hagrid nodded and moved forward. He heaved the gigantic spider in his arms and, with an enormous grunt, rolled it into the dark pit. It hit the bottom with a rather horrible, crunchy thud. Hagrid started to cry again. Of course it's difficult for you. Who knew him best? Said Slughorn, who, like Harry, could reach no higher than Hagrid's elbow, but patted it all the same. Why don't I say a few words? He must have got a lot of good quality venom from Aragog, Harry thought, for Slughorn wore a satisfied smirk as he stood up to the rim of the pit and said in a slow, impressive voice, Farewell, Aragog, king of the arachnids. whose long and faithful friendships those who knew you won't forget. Though your body will decay, your spirit lingers on in the quiet web-spun places of your forest home. May your many-eyed descendants ever flourish and your human friends find solace for the loss they have sustained. That was beautiful, howled Hagrid, and he collapsed into the compost heap, crying harder than ever. There, said Slughorn, waving his wand, so that the huge pile of earth rose up and fell, with a muffled sort of crash into the dead spider, forming a smooth mound. Let's get inside and have a drink. Get on the other side, Harry. That's it. Up you come, Hagrid. Well done. They deposited Hagrid in the chair at the table. Fang, who had been sulking in the basket during the burial, now came padding softly across to them, put his heavy head into Harry's lap, as usual. Slughorn uncorked one of the bottles of wine he had brought. I have had it all tested for poison, he assured Harry, pouring most of the first bottle into Hagrid's bucket-sized mugs and handing it to Hagrid. Had an house elf. Sorry, guys. Had a house elf taste every bottle after what happened to your poor friend Rupert. Harry saw in his mind's eye the expression of Hermione's face if she had ever heard about this absent abuse of house elves, and decided never to mention it to her. Oh, one for Harry, said Slughorn, dividing a second bottle between two mugs, and one for me. Well, he raised his mug high, to Aragog. Aragog, said Harry and Hagrid together. Both Slughorn and Hagrid drank deeply. Harry, however, with the way ahead illuminated for him by Felix Felicis, knew that he must not drink. So he merely pretended to take a gulp and then set the mug back on the table before him. I had him from an egg, you know, said Hagrid morosely. Tiny little thing he was when he was hatched. About the size of a Pekingese. Oh, sweet, said Slughorn. Used to keep him in a cupboard up at the school until, well, Hagrid's face darkened, and Harry knew why. Tom Riddle had contrived to have Hagrid thrown out of school, blamed for opening the Chamber of Secrets. Slughorn, however, did not seem to be listening. He was looking up at the ceiling, from which a number of brass pots hung, and also a long, silky skein of bright white hair. That's never unicorn hair, Hagrid. Oh, yeah, said Hagrid indifferently. Gets pulled out by their tails, which catch on branches and stuff in the forest, you know. But my dear chap, do you know how much that's worth? I'll use it for binding on bandages and stuff if creatures get injured, said Hagrid, shrugging. It's dead useful. Very strong, you see. Slughorn took another deep draught from his mug, his eyes moving carefully around the cabin now, looking. Harry knew for more treasures that might be able to convert into plentiful supply of oak mattered mead, crystallized pineapple, and velvet smoking jackets. He refilled Hagrid's mug and his own, and questioned him about the creatures that live in the forest these days and how Hagrid was able to look after them. Hagrid, becoming expressive under the influence of drink and Slughorn's flattering interest, stopped moping his eyes and entered happily into a long explanation of bow-truckle husbandry. The Felix Felicis gave Harry a little nudge. Sorry, my bird likes to fly. Felix Felicis gave Harry a little nudge at this point, and he noticed that the supply of drink that Slughorn had brought was running out fast. Harry had not yet managed to bring out the refillable charm without saying the incantation aloud, but the idea that he might not be able to do it tonight was laughable. Indeed, Harry grinning to himself as, unnoticed by either Hagrid nor Slughorn, now swapping tales of an illegal trade in dragon eggs, he pointed his wand under the table and emptied the bottles, and they immediately began refilling. In an hour or so, Hagrid and Slughorn began moving extravagant toasts. To Hogwarts, to Dumbledore, to elf-made wine, and to Harry Potter, bellowed Hagrid, slopping some of the four-tenth bucket of wine down his chin as he drained it. Yes, indeed, cried Slughorn in a tiny, a little thickly. Perry Otter, the chosen one. Well, who, something of that sort, he muttered, and drained his mug too. Not long after that, Hagrid became tearful again and pressed the whole unicorn tail upon Slughorn, who pocketed it with cries to friendship, to generosity, to 10 galleons a hair. And for a while after that, Hagrid and Slughorn were sitting side by side, arms around each other, singing a slow song about dying wizards called Odo. Arg, the good die young, muttered Hagrid, slumping low onto the table, a little cross-eyed, while Slughorn continued to warble the refrain. Me dad was no age to go, nor were ye mom and dad, Harry. Great fat tears oozed out of the corner of Hagrid's crinkled eyes. Again, he grasped Harry's arm and shook it. Best wizard and witch their age, I never knew. Terrible thing, terrible thing. And Udo the hero, they bore him back home to the place where he'd known as a lad, sang Slughorn plaintively. They laid him to rest with his hat inside out, and his wand snapped in two, which was sad. Terrible, Hagrid grunted, with great shaggy head rolled sideways onto his arms, and he fell asleep, snoring deeply. Sorry, said Slughorn with a hiccup. Can't carry a tune to save my life. Hagrid wasn't talking about your singing, said Harry quietly. He was talking about my mom and dad dying. Oh, said Slughorn, repressing a large belch. Oh dear, yes, that was terrible indeed. Terrible, terrible. He looked quite at loss for what to say, and resorted to refilling their mugs. I don't suppose you remember it, Harry, he asked awkwardly. No, well, I was only one when they died, said Harry, his eyes on the flame as the candle flickered in Hagrid's heavy snores. But I found out plenty much what happened since. My dad died first. Did you know that? I didn't, said Slughorn in a hushed voice. Yeah, Voldemort murdered him and then stepped over his body towards my mum, said Harry. Slughorn gave a great shudder, but he did not seem able to tear his horrible gaze away from Harry's face. He told her to get out of the way, said Harry remorsefully. He told me that she had died. He only wanted me. She could have run. Oh dear, breathed Slughorn. She could have. She didn't. She needed. That's awful. It is, isn't it? Said Harry in a very barely more than a whisper. But she didn't move. Dad was already dead, but she didn't want me to go too. She tried to plead with Voldemort, but he just laughed. That's enough, said Slughorn suddenly, raising his shaking hand. Really, my dear boy, enough. I'm an old man. I don't need to hear. I don't want to hear. I forgot, Harry lied. Felix Felice is leading him on. You liked her, didn't you? Liked her, said Slughorn, his eyes brimming with tears once more. I don't imagine anyone who'd met her wouldn't have liked her. Very brave, very funny. It was the most horrible thing. But you wouldn't help her son? Said Harry. She gave her life for me, but you won't give me a memory? Hagrid's rambling snores filled the cabin. Harry looked steadily into Slughorn's tear-filled eyes. The potions master seemed unable to look away. Don't say that, he whispered. It isn't a question if it were to help you, of course, but no purpose can be served. It can, said Harry clearly. Dumbledore needs information. I need information. I feel like I skipped a page. Hold on, guys. Nope, I didn't. He knew he was safe. Felix was telling him that Slughorn would remember nothing of this in the morning. Looking Slughorn straight in the eyes, Harry leaned forward a little. I am the chosen one. I have to kill him. I need that memory. Slughorn turned paler than ever. His shiny forehead gleamed with sweat. You are the chosen one? Of course I am, said Harry calmly. But then, my dear boy, you're asking a great deal. You're asking me, in fact, to aid you in the attempt to destroy... You don't want to get rid of the wizard who killed Lily Evans? Harry, of course I do, but... You're scared if he'll find out that you helped me? Slughorn said nothing. He looked terrified. Be brave like my mother, Professor. Slughorn raised a pudgy hand and pressed a shaking finger to his mouth. He looked for a moment like an enormously overgrown baby. I am not proud, he whispered through his fingers. I am ashamed of what that memory shows. I think I may have done great damage that day. You'd cancel out anything you did by giving me that memory, said Harry. It would be a very brave and noble thing to do. Hagrid twitched in his sleep and snored on. Slughorn and Harry stared at each other over the guttering candle. There was a long, long silence, but Felix Felicis told Harry not to break it, to wait. Then, very slowly, Slughorn put his hand in his pocket and pulled out his wand. He put his other hand inside his cloak and took out a small empty bottle. Still looking into Harry's eyes, Slughorn touched the tip of his wand to his temple and withdrew it, so that a long silvery thread of memory came away too, clinging to the wand tip. Longer and longer the memory stretched until it broke and swung, silverly bright, from his wand. Slughorn lowered it into the bottle where he was coiled and spread like swirling like gas. He corked the bottle with a trembling hand and then passed it across the table to Harry. Thank you very much, Professor. You're a good boy, said Professor Slughorn, tears trickling down his fat cheeks into his walrus mustache. And you've got her eyes. Just don't think too badly of me once you see it. And he, too, put his head on his arms, gave a deep sigh, and fell asleep.